Good morning, traders, and a happy Wednesday out there to everyone. Hope that y'all had a good evening there. And it should be a nice day that we have leading up in front of us here. And just before going into our charts here this morning, just good to note we're fairly light on the economic calendar there for today's purposes. Really major only item of note there is going to be our new home sales for the U.S. at 10 o'clock Eastern, and then, of course, 10:30, we'll have the crude oil figure there as well. So, two items there to take into account for our purposes there today. Outside of that, nice and light on the board there. So it gives us leeway here to come in and jump into our daily charts here of the S&Ps. We know we closed yesterday as an inside range bar, so we came in with breakout mode into the session here today. So far, we've been able to put in an overnight high or a Globex high of 55, 51, 75. So relatively contained overall. We didn't really extend ourselves too far, nor were we able to get above the 2-day high. We're doing some testing on both sides here in terms of the daily 5 SMA, just in terms of, since that's where we're trading here currently, 55.32 half is where that 5 SMA on the daily comes in. So a little balancing act here at the top of our swing. Outside of that, of course, by nature, right, these 20 period EMAs on the daily charts continue to work up. So as we do a little balancing act, the slope continues to be relatively well defined there with the 20 period EMA. So a little balancing act here at the top of the swing, coming into the session with breakout mode, so we can get some better range expansion. Suffice to say, at the time, clearly has not been the case there quite as of yet. And then from there, we'll also just take a little moment to assess what we had unfolding there overnight. Kind of like what we had yesterday, okay? So coming into the session here, we had up in the Asia session, okay, or low to high in the Asia. Europe session opening also brought it up a notch and then brought it back down. So Europe two-way trading. But in other words, right, no back-to-back consecutive sessions from overnight session to be overly concerned with there. Meaning if we had down Asia, down Europe, oftentimes that provides us with a little opportunity to rotate or have counter-reactive lift into U.S. morning. But we've already had some two-way trading, so as far as our overnight developments, pretty reasonable overall. And then from that point, we can of course come down here. We have the hourly display as well, just serving as our intraday chart. Same ideas, right? We came up, fell short on looking above the previous 2-day high there in the case of the S&Ps, and proceeded to work ourselves back. So Scion line here still being used to approximate that daily 5 SMA value there for us. So we're back on the other side of it briefly, but overall pretty wide range for us here. 55.10 is the big key area for the S&Ps, since we've had several tails there, but we can note that when we came down, we had our initial spike low, one slightly higher low, and then during yesterday's trading as well, we held a slightly higher low tail. So small progress. As we can see, no shortage of price bar overlap inside of this region there with the S&Ps. Alright, so we'll move on along here. We have the DAX next in the queue. DAX extremely well behaved in the overnight session. Right, we had our look above the 2-day high, whereas the S&Ps had fallen short on the same data point. So here with the DAX, what we can use for this as well, same ideas here with the intraday charts. Right, on our 120-minute visual in comparison to the hourly chart on the S&Ps. Right, we fell short, whereas the DAX came in and looked above previous reaction high. However, 18,490 to 18,550, low developed zone, so we came up, respected that area, and now just working ourselves back, as well as having two data points here. We have 18,250 there to serve us as a reference point further down below there in the case of the DAX. All right, equivalent point down below for the S&Ps would be once again that 55.10 mark. and then we have the euro currency as well. Right inside of our currency group, we had formed ourselves an inside range bar there on the close yesterday with that of the euro currency. Several bottoming tests that we've had here at the 71.50 mark. So we left the tail. We traded on both sides of the equation yesterday, but not enough to break outside of the previous day's range. So we've been able to come down, did some work on the tail here in the Globex session, and almost reminds us of the S&Ps here with these well-defined zones. So we can see we've come down on two separate occasions here and tested this pertinent area here. This is the 1.07150 in the case of the euro currency. So coming down in a relatively reasonable format. Would appreciate monitoring this oscillator condition, giving us that feeling of the A, B, C wave structure down. So as we come down towards these points of interest, we want to watch in there with the oscillator, see if we do showcase any signs of buy divergence or loss of momentum. But for now, that'll kind of be our primary point. See if we trade any closer towards that point there. As far as the euro currency goes, the 120-minute time frame should serve quite well there in conjunction with that daily visual. So that's our euro currency. We'll take a quick flash over here to the dollar index as well, just for comparison purposes. It as well had formed itself a reasonable balance on the close. So just to note, dollar index getting more steady range expansion up out of balance, whereas the euro currency a tad more subdued. So we want to take into account that the dollar has already made it above its 2 to 3 day high, whereas the euro currency has not quite gotten down to its point of interest as of yet. So following along there with the dollar index as well, making a nice, low to high move out of this balancing act. So just inverse the euro currency there for the most part. And then we have the gold here, which is kind of nice to be able to follow up there from where we settled yesterday. So we had our outside down bar, meaning, we took out the previous day's high and the previous day's low. We know that we were coming out of balance, so it was a range expansion bar that was a tad more on the mild side. We did indeed close at the lower end of the range, so we put in a low yesterday of 2327.1. So we were able to look below the previous day's low, not by a huge spread, but we did get down all right. This was 2315.7 in the gold. And with that said, right, it's always the component for the follow through from the breakdown on the 3-bar. It's always monitoring for that testing phase. Doesn't mean that we necessarily have to close below the previous day's low, but getting that out of the way fairly early on in the session, being done in the overnight. So back inside the previous day's range. However, still should be of good value, seeing how we trade around the 2327.1. And then to grab our intraday display of data, our 120-minute time frame, we see the same idea, the nature in which we left the tail. Short-lived, just kind of look below and then prop them back up. So here with the gold, basically between our overnight low, and still enjoy monitoring here the 2335 mark in the gold. We did put a test back up towards that zone in the Globex session. Our overnight high was 2335.8, so we tested very near the zone. We didn't really come back above it with too much definition, but the pink line here, kind of using that as a bit of an over and under there for the gold, one that we have to take into account on like a 5 or 15 minute data, some of the activity that we had unfolding overnight. So just propping them back up inside that previous day's range there for now in that of the gold. Alright, and then our crude in the mix here. Crude will go out on a bigger time frame there, a 120-minute visual. Here with the crude daily chart, we know that we had been on an extended run or good persistency of trend. We saw on the sheet there yesterday the 1 in the 5 column, just indicating that the crude had gotten its close back on the other side of the 5 SMA for the first time after 12 days up above it. So making all right progress here. We'll have this, we can even bold this 5 SMA up here just a notch, just to bring our attention there to it. But with that said, coming in at 81.18 here currently, we'll just put a little bolded line there on it just to make it a tad more visible for our purposes. So we did some work there. We kept ourselves above slightly the previous day's low, so we're building ourselves out an inside range bar in the grand scheme of things here. However, 81.18 is where that 5 SMA comes into sight. Also including here the intraday charts, a 120-minute display. However, no real major issues here. We had the 1, 2, 3 pushes up, our kind of A, B, C that's been filling out range, and the high test stands out to us fairly well there, of course, 81.90 being the previous day's high. And, should we have any change in tone, what would shift this line of thinking? We do have the crude report later, so in case they have some adverse reaction, we're well above it for now, but 80.11, bigger picture would be a caution zone for that at the crude, so that's the same level that stands out over here on the daily. So for now, no major issues, no damage done. Working on testing back on the other side of the 5 SMA and holding for now well above the 80.11 caution mark. So 120-minute chart should serve us there in that crude A-OK, and we'll see what that 1030 figure brings to the table. And then last but certainly not least here, we have the bonds, our 30 years, as we know, higher degree of price bar overlap in terms of our groupings. So we had the balancing act. We tried some work there on the upside yesterday, not the range expansion component. We closed as a doji bar, so no real superb extension out of balance. So we did the failure to break out on the upside. So we're trying out the other side on for size. As we can see here, we'd be running into this 119.07 visible swing low on 2 separate daily bars. So seeing that visual here on the 120-minute data. First of all, this would be your range bound scenario, right? Multiple data points down here at the bottom, a nice sideways line through most of these data points here around that 120 handle. So we've really been going through this back and forth, tightening up a notch. You can see the oscillator has started to flatten out. So as we come in here with the bonds, these areas, stick out to us here. That's that same 119.07 that we can see from the daily chart. So, they're moving towards it in a very slow manner, and if we accelerate through it, of course, then we'll have our bigger zones of interest. 118.19 is a very bigger zone of caution, clearly a ways away from that point for now. But as we work our way down here in the bonds, just to note here, you do have these 2 previous cycle lows that we could certainly keep in mind there for them. So that would be there with the 30s, and then as well, you could always check up on the notes. Looking awfully similar there in their composition, aren't they? So here with the 10-year notes, the equivalent cycle low here, a tad closer towards it at the 110.06, and then we have the same zone here, low developed or single print areas that come in slightly deeper below. So closer towards that point in the 10s than what we have in the 30 years. So it should be a mighty interesting one out there today. We have some good technical conditions to keep tabs on there. What we'll do for now is grab that hourly chart of the S&Ps, get that one back and situated, and then we'll get some of these other charts back and adjusted and see what we got lining up in terms of movement here off of our early 8 a.m. reading. For now, clearly we've been working from high to low, so small degree of trendiness, and we're just working our way down towards the lower end of this hourly display, 55.10 1/4. No, it's a ways down there. It's a full 20 handles down, but just to note, it's a more significant area there for us to have on the sheets. So let this all start to get settled in and see what we have lining up for us coming up. And once again, no pressing data points or anything. We have a 9 o'clock figure from that won't be of major substance, and then home sales at 10 o'clock Eastern.